All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. I think we're waiting for some folks to trickle in. We'll give it a minute or two here. Um, let's see. We got a few folks coming on. We have a new webinar system, so if I'm fumbling over that a little bit, apologies. We'll figure it out in the next 5 minutes. Maybe we'll do kind of a quick drop an icebreaker question, the classic webinar kickoff. Maybe where you're calling in from, and how you are funding benefits today. Fully insured, level funded. Maybe any context around that would be awesome. Let's really kick things off. I am in Westchester County, New York. Chicago, level funded. Very good.
Nice.
We are also level funded. Awesome. Fully insured. Hey, Mitch. Cool. I think we have like 3 minutes earmarked for when to get started. So I think we'll give folks a minute to come in here. LA, what's up? Good morning to the West Coast, I think. Still, yeah.
Still love, yep. That's a fully insured.
I think I gotta come up with a better webinar icebreaker question. I don't know, we were talking about it earlier, like favorite healthy snack or something. Like what are you eating these days? What are you watching on TV? Boca, very nice. I'm sure it is nicer weather in Boca than it is in rainy, cold New York, even though it is May. We're waiting for that spring weather to hit. Minnetonka, Rachel, I didn't know the exact town. I love that.
Minnetonka, yeah. You know the moccasin?
I don't. Is there a famous moccasin?
Yeah. And also, fun fact, I learned that Tonka Trucks was started in Minnetonka.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, I'm watching our numbers trickle upward, so I think we'll dive in. So welcome officially. Thank you for being here. We've called this session an AMA or an Ask Me Anything, which I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with. And that's the idea, right? Rachel and I are not here to sell you Nava. I know we get a bunch of Nava clients, and sure, we'll love talking about that. But really here because benefits funding is frankly one of the most misunderstood topics in HR and in people operations. And we think that employers should be empowered to make the right decision for their business. And what we're going to talk about today is kind of this notion of beyond fully insured. So there is a different way, lots of different ways actually, to pay for employees' healthcare, different ways to get access to data, different ways to control costs. And we're going to dive into all that good stuff today. So we'll start with some kind of quick intros on ourselves. I have the mic. My name is Nick Moores. I'm a senior benefits advisor here at Nava. My job is to work with employers of all shapes and sizes to help sustainably contain costs and provide a really excellent experience to employees, which is who we're here for at the end of the day.
Yeah. And thanks, Nick. And I'm Rachel Aleknavichus. I am a national benefits broker here at Nava, and my focus is helping employers understand and act on their benefits data. So specifically, that means helping them figure out whether alternative funding makes sense for their organization.
Awesome.
Yeah, so one thing I'll say about this session is that we are going to go through a lot of some of the concepts that we're going to open up. There's no dumb questions, so just let Nick or I or the chat know if you have any questions going forward. That really, like Nick said, the whole point of this is to help bring some clarity around some of these concepts because there are so many of them and they can be confusing.
Awesome. So just broad kind of problem statement, right? Healthcare is, for most organizations, the second largest line item on your company's P&L, right behind payroll. For some of the AI companies that might be out there, we might be number 3 to Claude tokens now. But for 99% of companies, it's 8 to 15% of total compensation costs. And for most employers who are on a fully insured plan, it's also the one expense, like relative to the size, that you have the least visibility into. So you know what you paid. You don't really know why or what drove it, and if the number is fair, frankly. So you're kind of getting that like 8, 10, 15% renewal increase every year, and it's tough to bend the cost curve. So that's kind of the problem that we're going to operate against today. And the way that I like to think about this is like any other expense at that level of scale in your business is very highly scrutinized. And a lot of times, HR teams and CFOs are signing off on this without the right data, without the right benchmarks, and like not like a proactive plan to actually manage those healthcare costs. So that is kind of maybe the problem statement today in healthcare. And I think that's a pretty common problem that people are quite familiar with. And then fully insured benefits specifically is asking you to effectively has the least amount of insight and information into what's going on in the plan. And that's what we're going to talk through today, different ways to kind of pay for and fund the benefits program. Before we go into specific funding types, maybe a quick framework to think about this. Every funding strategy can be evaluated across kind of 3 questions. Who pays out claims? So your employee goes to the hospital or goes to a doctor, they get a bill. Who is writing the check to that provider? Second is who is assuming the risk? And in this case, we're talking about financial risk. So who is financially exposed if you get a big spike in claims or have a really high kind of usage month? And then third is who benefits if employees are staying healthy and they're not using the claims, they're going to get their preventative care, catching things early, right? So when premiums collected exceed what actually gets spent on care, who benefits and who wins? So in fully insured arrangement, the answer is the carrier, the insurance carrier, United, Cigna, Aetna, Anthem, the Blues, right? They're paying the claims, that they're carrying the risk, and they're keeping the savings. So they get that pretty significant upside as well. And as you move along this, what we think of as like a funding spectrum or funding kind of maturity curve, those answers shift from the carrier towards the employer. The trade-off is a little bit of more complexity, a little bit more variation and variability in monthly cost specifically, but the rewards generally really outweigh those kind of that complexity and a little bit of additional kind of work sometimes that it takes. You get more data, you get more control, you get to capture all the upside. So we'll keep those kind of framing in mind as we go through the specific funding arrangements today. Who pays out claims, who assumes the risk, and who saves money when the plan runs really well. So I'm going to briefly break down the 2 kind of broad ends of the spectrum. On the left is where most companies are today. I think most folks in the chat said fully insured. So you write a check to the carrier, employee goes to the doctor, the carrier pays the bill. If your employee stays healthy and claims run low, carrier keeps the difference as a profit. You're going to get your premium. You're going to get your 8 or 10% increase either way. And if you have a bad year, I'm sure folks have seen you can get a lot worse than that. On the other side of the spectrum is self-funded. That is more like, instead of paying the carrier, we're taking a big pile of money, we're setting it aside. And then as claims come in, we as the employer are paying those bills directly. There's third-party administrators and there's other parties in there that support that. But it's kind of the 2 ends of the spectrum where you're paying out of a set pool of money versus you're paying the carrier, right? On the self-funded side, you get tons of visibility, but the fundamental difference is that the carrier is betting that your premium is going to exceed your claims and they keep winning. Whereas if you're self-funded, you're the one who's making that bet. And when your employees stay healthy, you get to capture the upside. Okay. A little bit more risk, way more upside, fully insured pretty consistently. The carriers are pretty good at this. They're almost always going to win. They're going to get their operating margin and they're going to give you a big increase next year if things don't go the way they planned. So why doesn't everyone just go fully self-funded? Well, we'll talk about that. It's not the right fit for everybody. But let's flip forward and go through some more specific examples. I think the question we're kind of thinking about, or the topic that we're thinking about, is in fully insured, you are paying for certainty that you probably don't need, and the carrier is capturing the profit, right? It means you're paying a premium for the guarantee that your costs won't vary. You get a flat monthly number, eliminates the risk that a bad claims year won't hurt you. And that sounds great. And for some employers, it is the right answer. Truly, we're not here to say that every single person should move towards self-funding. But that certainty costs you the carrier profit margin plus the administrative kind of markup that they put on it, their reserves, and then the actuarial buffer. It's all baked into your premium. So whatever your actual claims are, think about, you have $1 million bill, you have about 850,000 in annual claims. There's a 15 or 25% kind of administrative buffer on top of that. And that's profit margin administrative costs for the carrier. So for employers with maybe a healthier workforce, a younger workforce with the free cash to absorb some of the variability, many of the companies in the session today, frankly, that 10 or 15 or 25% kind of margin is something that you can capture a big chunk of. So that alternative is kind of a spectrum. There's all the way from fully insured, carrier takes all the margin, self-funded, you keep it all. And what we're going to talk about today is 3 or 4 kind of examples in between that allow you to kind of progressively take on a little bit more risk and dip your toe into the self-funding kind of ecosystem and move up that maturity curve.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So I'm going to put some numbers on the table because this is where the conversation gets a bit more concrete. So the first number is approximately 20%. That's the average employer savings when moving from fully insured to self-funded. So in some cases, your claim. I'm sorry, was there a question?
I think you're good.
Okay. In cases where the claims are running below your carrier's projected loading factor, or what they project your claims to be running at, some groups are seeing 15%, some are seeing 25%. So it just depends on your workforce and your utilization, but the average is pretty meaningful. The second number there is 61%. That's the share of employers with 200 to just under 1,000 employees who have already moved from fully insured to some sort of self-funding. So this is not really a fringe strategy. It's the majority of approach for the mid-market companies, and the number keeps growing. And the third is 3 to 5%. Every year on a fully insured plan, your premium inflates 3 to 5% beyond what your actual claim spend is. So that gap is not random, it's structured, and it's the carrier's margin that's baked into every single renewal. And the fourth is 100% claims data access. So when you self-fund, you own your data. You know what conditions are on your plan, where the care gaps exist, if there's specialty medications that employees are utilizing. That data, that's the foundation for every smart business decision that you'll make going forward. So let me show you what that 3 to 5% gap looks like over a compounding time. So this chart illustrates, I should say, this chart is illustrative, but it shows the pattern, which is real and consistent in the industry. So you're looking at 3 lines over 5 years. The first line there, that top line, is your fully insured premium. So it starts high and it's going to climb higher because each increase is applied to an already inflated base. The middle line is your actual claim cost. This is what your employees are actually spending on insurance, or on care, I should say. And the bottom line is what self-funding looks like, inclusive of stop loss in place. So you'll notice 3 things. One is that the fully insured premium starts above your actual claim spend, and the gap year 1 is the carrier's loading factor. And that includes their admin costs, their profit margin, and reserves. Number 2 is that the gap widens every year. A 7% increase on an inflated number means that the absolute dollar gap is going to grow rather quickly and significantly. This is what the compounding effects that we talk about, and it is resilient, or relentless, sorry. And number 3 is the self-funded line that tracks much closer to your actual claims spend or your claims utilization. So you'll notice that the self-funding is you're paying for what your employees are actually using, plus your administration cost and stop loss protection. but you're not paying for the carrier's profit margin. So over 5 years, the cumulative difference of those top and bottom can be very significant. For some employers, it's hundreds and thousands of dollars. So let's talk how we get there. There are several options when we talk about alternative funding. So Nick mentioned there's fully insured and self-funding. In that self-funding category, there's different types of I would say, or levels of self-funding, which we call alternative funding. So there's 4 main funding arrangements on the spectrum, from most familiar to full control. The self-funding, like I said, we already talked about. It's a model we've been discussing. Beyond there, we have gap funding, which is the most conservative. You stay mostly on the carrier relationship, but you start taking a little bit of the risk for your population and your employees. And then there's level funding, which is probably the most common entry point for employers with 200 or fewer employees. And it looks and feels like fully insured on the surface, but underneath, you're going to own your claims data and get a refund when you have a year that beats your expected claim cost. And captives, this is a group self-funding model. This is where you pool risk with other employers to smooth out the volatility versus going at it alone. So we're going to walk through each one. So gap funding is designed for the employer who's intrigued in alternative funding but isn't ready to make the full commitment. It's really dipping your toe in the water rather than just diving in. How it works is your employees are placed on a high deductible health plan. So that means you're paying a lower premium because of that higher deductible. But here's the key point. You present a lower deductible to your employees. For example, say you purchase a plan from your medical carrier that's a $5,000 deductible. But what you present to your employees is a $1,000 PPO plan. Employees are responsible for that $1,000 deductible. After they hit that, the employer takes on the gap. So you're covering their deductible costs from $1,001 up to $5,000. If anyone hits the $5,000 deductible, the insurance company takes it from there. So you're sharing the risk with the carriers and you're covering the gap, but you also have that ceiling. So if your employees stay relatively healthy and your claims stay low, you've spent less on premiums because you have that high deductible plan in place and you've covered a modest gap costs and you've come out ahead, which is ultimately the goal. The trade-off is that you're not getting your full claims data depending on your size. So if you're 200 or under employees, you're typically not getting a full scope of your utilization from the carriers. But gap funding is a first step because you are getting a sense of your utilization and the health of your population based on the amount of gap that you are fulfilling. So it's definitely a legitimate on-ramp into that alternative funding. The next in the spectrum is where most employees we work with end up going, and this is level funding. So level funding is self-funding, but with predictable monthly costs. So the potential of a refund at year end is the arrangement that generally combines the best of both worlds for employers who want to make a move but aren't really ready to go fully self-funded. The mechanics are you pay a fixed monthly amount, just like you do in a fully insured world. You're paying a fixed premium, and so your budget doesn't fluctuate. That fixed premium is calculated based on your worst case scenario claims. So the carriers predict your worst case scenario for claim cost for the year, and that's where they set your premiums. Inside your premium payment, you have 3 buckets: your projected claims fund, your stop loss insurance to cap any downside, and then there's admin fees. Throughout the year, your claims are paid from your fund. So you're paying your premiums every month like you do in a fully insured world. At the end of the year, you look at the scoreboard, and if your actual claims came in under what was projected, that projected maximum, you get a surplus back. If claims run over your refund or over your fund, your stop loss kicks in and it's absorbed into your renewal for the following year. But the critical point here is that you get your data and you have a real insight into what's driving claims cost in a real time. So the surplus, which is fully insured, and then the surplus, which in a fully insured world just goes right back to the carrier, is actually coming back to you. So level funding is generally the right conversation for employers with roughly, I'd say 50 to 200 employees, have a medium risk tolerance and limited HR bandwidth because it's available in a bundled solution, meaning you're bundling it with one carrier. Your Anthem, United Healthcare, Cigna, you're picking them and you're just changing from fully insured to level funded with that one carrier. So the next option that employers want to go further into the self-funded spectrum is the captives. So captives are fully self-funded, but with a safety net. And that safety net is other employers. So you are going into a okay, let me back up. If you're going into a self-funded world and have a small risk pool, for example, you have 80 employees. If you have 2 large claims on that plan for the year, it could be pretty catastrophic to your overall costs, with or without stop loss. So the idea of a captive is to solve that problem. It brings a captive groups other employers together. And so you join a group of companies all paying a shared fund into the captive. The captive pays claims for all members, and then stop loss covers all the catastrophic claims. And because you're spending risk or you're spreading risk across all the employers, the year-to-year volatility smooths out. So when the captive has a good year, the savings go back to the members or the employers that are part of the group, not to the carrier, which is all what we're the whole theme here, I guess. The trade-off is the complexity. Captives can be a bit complex. There's a lot of moving parts. You are setting up stop loss, a third-party administrator, which administers your claims, and the network that you access. So these are typically advisable for groups that have more than 100 employees, maybe an HR team with greater bandwidth that can help set up internally some of these programs that will have to be touched, and cash on hand to manage the variable claims, because you will be paying claims on a weekly basis. It's not a fixed flat premium like level funded or fully insured. But for the right employer, captives are great. They deliver amazing data access. You're going to have all the insight into your employees and what they're utilizing. And then they also have that smooth transition for protection in the stop loss or volatility. So let's talk about the data that comes with self-funding.
Hey, Rachel, we have 2 questions in the chat. I think before we move on from the structure pieces here, just in order, is there a chart like this to compare level funded? And I believe I can flip back. I don't know if I have it worked. Shannon, to answer your question, level funding is you're going to potentially get that refund, or you're going to potentially get hit. It's kind of like slightly higher increases if you have a bad year, and if you have a good year, you get money back. So I would imagine it's like in between the two. It's probably a little bit lower than fully insured, but probably not quite as good as the stop loss, because you're not capturing all of the upside of how your claims are running against expected. Rachel, would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say that's fair, because with the fully or with the level funding, you are looking at your maximum claim cost. And so you do get some of the refund back, A lot of times with most carriers, you don't get the full surplus. The carriers are sharing some of that surplus with you. So there's still an upside for them as well. But yes, it would definitely be a curve under the fully insured. So it's going to be under that bottom or that top line, but not quite as spot on or following the utilization as close as the self-funded.
And to address the other question, which I actually think you hit, is that the question was, with level funded, the surplus refund is not the full amount, right? So the answer is yes. It's typically 50% of like the full surplus. And you can think of it as like, hey, the carrier is giving you the value of a self-funded plan with a consistent monthly payment. So you don't have the cash variability where you might get one month that's like 6 months worth because you had a bad month, and then a few that are really low. It is a 50% refund in most level funded contracts, as opposed to kind of the full surplus, which you would get in an ASO self-funded environment.
I do know of a TPA that gives the full surplus back. So there are, if folks are interested, yeah. So I only know of one so far, but they are providing the full surplus back, which is kind of unheard of, definitely against the norm.
What's the TPA is the follow-up question from Shannon.
It's Health Easy. They're based in Minnesota. They have national access, tap into the Cigna, Aetna, and another network, but yeah, Health Easy. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, I will resume the regularly scheduled. Haley beat me to it. Perfect.
All right, so your claims data as a strategy tool. This is another big part of going to an alternative funding strategy, is having that insight into your claims data. Under the fully insured world, the carrier owns your claims data, and that's not by accident. I used to be an underwriter. Like they want to have that and not share it, because it's, from the carrier's perspective, employers who can see that data can negotiate, and the employers who can't. So alternative funding gives you back some of that power and that control. And so we wanted to kind of walk you through what that means, or what that data access can mean in a business strategy. So first, you can see it. Claims by condition, the pharmacy, the utilization patterns, the high cost claimants, year-over-year trends, ER visits versus preventive care. This is your workforce's health picture. And right now, most of you are probably flying a plane without any instruments. Second, you can understand it. So what's actually driving your costs? Where are the care gaps? Which benefits are being used? So many employers we talk to have these point-based solutions that are in place, but may not have any utilization. So that's stuff that we can really dive into and spend money more wisely. And third, you can act on it. Smarter plan design, targeted point solutions for the conditions that are really meaningful and really occurring in your population, stronger negotiating position, benefits built around what your employees actually need and want versus what the carrier's model is saying they probably need. So this is the shift from reactive to proactive, and it's only possible when you have the data. So this is exactly what Nava was built for and our HQ model. And total spoiler or warning that this is where we go into a little bit of a sales pitch for our marketing team. So just, if you can stick tight with us for the next 4 minutes or so, we'll get into some questions, but I really wanted to show you how we're using the technology to answer and provide some of these insights to our clients. Nava has our AI-enabled platform called HQ. So this is where we are using to do claims projections and provide clients some insights into how to better manage their plan. So Haley, if you go to the next slide, I think we'll just give 2 brief examples. So I was talking with a group, they're currently fully insured. They're like, we have a lot of large claims. So that's why we've been being hit. But so put the renewal into HQ and saw the large claim activity, and it's like, what can be done? There's different programs when you have alternative funding in place, such as Samaritan Fund, where you can carve out large claims potentially and put them on a grant type of plan where they're fully covered, same type of coverage that you have as an employer, but they're off your group plan. And so I modeled this with our HQ system, and it shows you the potential savings of premium with or without claims management over the year. So if you are just looking at, year over year saying we're waiting for these claims to fall off or we're hoping that they get better without taking any type of action, your premiums, of course, are going to reflect that you have poor claims. However, if we take some action and really, try and drive a claims management program, we're saving, in this case, millions of dollars. Okay. In the next slide, I have a client who is fully insured. They had never heard of level funding when we took over as their broker, and they had heard of captives and were not really ready to go there. Their finance team's like, it's just too much. We're just not ready there. Fine. So I asked him about level funding. He's like, we're running good. We have a pretty good renewal. I checked their MLR with their carrier and it was 54%, which is ridiculously low. Yet the carrier was continuing to give them increases every year. So I proposed that we look and see what a level funding trajectory could look like. And this is the result. So you'll see the top line, if they remain fully insured for the next 3 years, what that would look like versus if they moved to a level funding model. And here again, we're talking millions of dollars saved over the accumulation of 3 years, potentially with level funding versus staying fully insured. Again, they don't have any major issues with their current situation, but if they're wanting to grow and expand like they are and keep their costs under control, this is some easy money to find and free up for those other projects.
Yeah. And I think one of the big take homes of the kind of annual renewal hamster wheel that I know just like many HR and finance leaders find themselves on is that every year you get a 7 or 8 or 10% increase. That is resetting your cost basis, because next year you're still going to get a 7 or 8% increase, but it's that annual compounding that really starts to hurt. And I think the idea with these funding arrangements is to get control of the information and the data so that the carrier no longer has this like asymmetric negotiation advantage that they do when you're a little bit smaller and maybe have no insight into actually what's happening in your plan. So yeah, excited to talk a bit more about this. We have plenty of time left, I think, for a Q&A. And maybe just to kind of land like, hey, this sounds really good. What do we do about it, right? I think I want to end kind of the content portion today with something a little concrete, because like we want to leave you intrigued, of course, but like, what's the step forward? So I think step one is like, what is the current situation? How many employees do we have? What does our actual like renewal history look like? I think a lot of people think of this on an annual cycle, whereby it really should be kind of a 2 or 3 year plan. And that basic info kind of tells you like what arrangements are on the table for your size. And I'm talking about this as if we're Nava kind of as a consultant. Step two is pulling what data you actually have. If you're on a fully insured plan today, I know we kind of beat up fully insured saying you have no data, you have no data. Some companies of certain sizes, I think like 100, 150, 200, you'll start to get some loss ratio information from the carriers. You can use that as like a starting point of how your claims are running. And then talk about it internally, right? Really recommend looping in finance earlier. Alternative funding reflects some types of funding arrangements impact cash flow and budgeting. So you need to be able to kind of account for variations or have some premium set aside, for some reserves, they're called. And getting alignment early makes that process much easier. Step four is engage with your broker. Engage with us. If we're not your broker yet, engage with us. If not, talk to your current broker, right? And this is where that like expert consulting really comes in to assess the fit, walk you through the options, do modeling against benchmarking, contribution, actuarial analysis of the plan values, how they're spread against each other, help with TPA selection, stop loss sourcing, all that good stuff. But it starts with a conversation. It starts with knowing things stand today. And then start that process early. Maybe it's not on here. Like 6 months before your renewal is a good time, not 3 or 4 months. Like it just sometimes happens. And then quote to compare, right? Look at all the options every year. Look at level funding, quote gap card, difference card, not stop wellness, some of the different MERPs that are out there, and really get a full picture of the market every year. Something your broker should hopefully be doing for you proactively. And I think proactive is the name of the game with this sort of thing. Having your data and doing so with intention is the best way to drive good outcomes. It's cool. We just went through like a ton of information. So we have some FAQs that we want to address, but if there's any questions, it'd be a great time. Throw them in the chat. We can have people come up and ask them live, and we're here to help. Cool. Rachel, maybe you want to take a couple of these first ones, and I can jump in as appropriate.
Yeah, the cash flow. So this one does come up often with, we're interested in going self-funded, but how much cash flow do we need? And that's really going to depend on your group. It's going to depend on the size of your employer, your group, how many employees you have, your utilization history, like how your claims cost been. So it's very specific to each individual employer. Typically, what we want to see is 1 to 3 months of what we call reserves of cash. So, if you're paying $1 million, $1.5 million in premium for your medical plan every year, we want to have 1 to 3 months of that on hand in your what we call reserves. You are going to be having some cash flow, ups and downs every month or every week paying your claims payments, but you can think of that as your premium payment. What we do is we break down a monthly rate for you to budget for those costs, that claim cost protection. So long and short of it, 1 to 3 months of cash flow we would like to have on hand.
Yeah. Rachel, I think we got a couple of really good questions in the chat around the resetting of the annual basis. Shannon asked, do carriers have a percentage they bake into increases regardless of claims run? For example, 8 to 10% increase, or even feels like the last couple of years, the benchmark has been closer to 20, 25%. And I think there's some other folks that are validating that, and I can validate that from my experience. So how does that work from a level funded plan? Hey, we got a surplus, but we still got a 7% increase. Like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah. And so the carriers are going to bake in what they're kind of call medical trend every year. And so that's where that 8 to 10% is going to come in. You're going to see a benchmark no matter what funding arrangement, to be completely honest, because stop loss carriers do the same thing in the self-funded space. Everyone's going to, put some sort of benchmark in. What we're trying to do is make sure that those increases are the least possible for your employees. In a fully insured world, that benchmark can be 10, 12%, but then you're paying the carrier profit margins and the admin fees and, some in taxes on top of that, which accumulate rather quickly. So in the alternate funding space, we can eliminate some of those additional fixed costs, what we call them. You have more control of the admin cost. You have more control of the profit margin, if you will, that the carriers are taking in that level funded space. So yes, you can't completely get out of it, but we can make it better.
Yeah. And I think we have another one here around catastrophic claims amount. So the carriers keep manipulating the catastrophic claims amount. So like 50K level versus 100K. I think we're referring to maybe the specific stop loss during negotiation, like when self-funded. So the question is in a self-funded plan, how do you have your TPA negotiate claims down at the time of a claim being received? And how do you truly vet that TPA partnership? Maybe some examples of your favorite players there. A few questions in one. Really good one, though.
So the stop loss deductible, so that So in the fully insured world, that's called your pooling point. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of fluctuation because the carriers look at their pooling point every year. So what that means is that they're looking to see how much risk they're going to take on every year. So you might have a $50,000 pooling point this year, you get your renewal, and all of a sudden the carriers upped it to 75,000 and potentially increased your price for that higher deductible as well. That's definitely a game that the fully insured space plays. In the self-funded space, you're selecting that deductible and based on your risk tolerance. So how much of the claim cost, can you manage per employee? 50,000, 75,000, higher. The TPA, that's a tricky one. The TPA really depends on what network you want to have access to. So there are third-party administrators, very select few that can tap into Anthem. Anthem's very protective of their network and has a very select few TPAs that they work with. Then you have Cigna and Aetna or UHC. They all have their preferred TPA. Whether or not that's good or bad, I don't know. I think TPAs are kind of like Ben admin systems where they all have their own faults and have to be managed. And that's where us as your broker, or if your current broker, should be able to support you in managing those relationships if there needs to be any gaps that are filled, and staying on top of TPAs to reimburse claims, to send to stop loss carriers, that type of thing. They can get pretty lax. I don't know if that really answered the question very well, but the TPA one is tricky. It's a one we struggle with all the time.
Yeah, I think you're looking for things like real-time claims dashboard, itemized fee disclosures, like no spread pricing on pharmacy. There's a lot of kind of box checks in an RFP that you want like full transparency and visibility into what's happening. A lot of times the TPA can be a black box where they kind of get the claim in and they pay it out, and you're like, oh, like, wait, I don't really understand what happened there. I'm not getting as good of data. So there's a whole bunch of different things that the broker can help you evaluate in terms of that TPA relationship too.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Should we move on to the rest of our plugged questions while folks maybe think of some more?
Sure.
Let's do it. Oh, here we go. We had this up already. How do we avoid expensive legal risks related to mismanagement and improper claims? TPAs, right?
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of TPA, so when you move to a self-funded space, this is a question that comes up quite often. It's a good one, to be aware that there are liabilities as an employer that you're taking on. You are opening yourself up to it. You're a little bit more. So everything has to be ERISA compliant. You should have a HIPAA compliant person internally because you're dealing with personalized health information, or PHI. But for the most part, that third-party administrator or that TPA that you partner with, they become your carrier. They become the fiduciary for your plan documents, your processing the claims, and your carrier networks. So a lot of the compliance falls in the TPA. And so this is something that you should be talking about when you're vetting TPAs on their compliance terms and how they deal with these things and what types of protection they have in place.
Awesome. How do I know if self-funding is the right fit for my company?
Do you want to take that, or you want me to?
I'll take a stab.
Okay.
I think there are many situations where self-funding is the right fit. There's also probably many where it's not. I think the partnership, I think it's basically about how willing are we to absorb fluctuations in monthly spend with the multi-year roadmap in place. And we want to think of this over kind of a 3 or 4 or 5 year time horizon, not kind of a 1 year time horizon. You want to look at things like, how have my claims trends been over the last few years? what is my cash availability? What is my finance team's both operational ability to like pay out the claims and manage this on an ongoing basis, and just cash availability in general. So some of the things that you look at, I think like philosophically, it's we want to take control over this, like I always use the analogy, the hamster wheel of the annual kind of fully insured increase. And I think that the crux of it is it's not right for everybody yet. It is probably right for almost every company at scale over time once you get to a certain size. I know it's a little bit of a squishy answer.
Yeah, and I'll add to that a little bit too. If I saw some folks from California on the call, California is still a tricky state where HMOs are still pretty prevalent, particularly with Kaiser. And if you're a group that has a Kaiser slice, alternative funding can be even trickier with half of your population with Kaiser. So that you cannot self-fund an HMO. And so if you are in California and you have a lot of employees in it with an HMO, this may take a longer road map to get to some type of alternative funding. That's something that we can model out and talk through, but it's definitely doing a comparison and analytics of what we call a self-funding feasibility analysis, where is this the right approach for us? And I had a client that said, we want to move self-funding, help us get there. So it was a matter of, getting folks off of the HMO and getting folks used to a high deductible health plan and a PPO. And there's lots of steps that have to get there. So it's not necessarily a 1 year, hey, we're moving from fully insured to self-funding. It's oftentimes a 3 or 4 and some maybe even a 5-year step to get there. But to Nick's point, as you scale and as premiums continue to increase in that fully insured world, self-funding or some type of alternative funding just becomes more and more realistic.
Yeah. Shannon's keeping us on her toes today. We got another one in the chat that I want to throw over to you, Rachel. Is there a way to for sure model the cost savings going ASO, which is self-funded administrative services only, all carved in versus level funded with the same provider?
Yeah, there is. So, and that's something that we do for our clients and prospects all the time. We can definitely, we take in the data that is available and and provide that analysis for you. So yes, we can check with the carrier and get them a level funded quote, request a self-funded quote. We break things apart and get a self-funded quote, with other carriers or third-party administrators. So that's actually one of the things we lean heavily into our HQ model to help us with, because it can do it in a matter of minutes to provide that analysis for you.
When do we start having this conversation? That is a great question. Yesterday. Yesterday. Yeah. I think there's a couple factors. One, it depends on how the size of your company. Like, 80-person company is maybe a little bit less lead time required than a 1,200-person company, for example. I always like to say somewhere in the ballpark of 6 to 9 months prior to your renewal and we think of that in the context of kind of Nava is like the size of clients that we work with, which is kind of like 50 to like 3,000 or 4,000 employees broadly. Maybe 3,000 or 4,000 you did about a year in advance. I think that's probably the short answer to that one, is as soon as possible, as soon as you can get access to data, even if you're not getting, even if you don't have your renewal yet, you can start kind of forecasting and planning and working with finance, right, to that kind of self-funded discussion earlier.
Yeah, a lot of times the biggest hurdle is getting your finance team on board. And so with many of these approaches, it's internal education, which we or your broker should be helping with, and getting finance up to speed on what everything entails. So we want to make sure that they're included in these conversations because they're a big part of this transition.
All right. I believe that's our show. We flipped forward twice. I believe that's our show. We got 10 minutes. If anyone has like really hairy benefits questions of any shape and size, we're totally happy to kind of just spend the next 10 minutes chatting through it. Is there data around where increases are coming in for 2026? Would love to learn from the earlier plan year resets ahead of a 1 star. Great question.
Yeah, we just talked about this at Fixed Healthcare Live last week. Yeah, 2027. Yeah. So I'm not going to be able to quote this exact, but last year was one of the worst renewal years in the history of medical renewals. 2026 renewals were hot and it was hard. And apparently the Wall Street Journal is predicting that this year for 2027 is going to be even worse. So we're seeing that the trend is only getting worse in that fully insured space. So yeah, I would hold on tight. It's going to be a rough landing again.
Yeah. And I think we were talking about this notion of like medical trend, which is basically just carrier speak for inflation plus profit margin that they need to maintain. And I think as you see kind of macroeconomic conditions of just the cost of healthcare in terms of, supplies and labor and all that stuff that kind of goes into it, hospitals are asking for a little bit more money for the same procedures, and insurance companies are in a position to pay for those things. So I think it's safe bet to say that it's unfortunately we're not quite at the end of the tunnel on the fixed healthcare, reduce the price of healthcare mission that we're on. So it's going to be another one. Thanks, Linda. Glad it was helpful. All right. I will continue to tap dance on stage for another 15 seconds, unless there's any other questions. We can give everyone kind of 5-10 minutes back here on their Wednesday. Thank you all for joining. This has been great. Really enjoyed talking about this stuff. And as always, here to help if there's anything benefits related, if prospective client, someone who's just curious, we'd love to talk about it. So
yeah. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate it.
Thanks a ton. Take care, y'all.
Yep. Bye.